I do want to say that I have a brother that actually went through something like that, and he went to the court and he did everything that he was supposed to do, and they still didn't grant him 50-50. He went to the court, he hired a lawyer that he pays for.
The person that I'm talking about didn't have 50-50 either. He had a specific, because he worked a lot, so he couldn't get 50-50. He was out of the country, things like that. But the other thing is the men that I know, there's quite a few, if we look at the stats, a lot of, single-led households, is out of all of those men that I do know, they do get to see their kid. Some of them actually now, even though the mother was awarded, they're raising their own kids. And I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but I think that we make that story,
what is your
story more often than not, is all I'm saying.
What is your point? What was your main point in saying all of that?
The main point was the fact that if men really want to have access to their children, then they need to do what they need to do in order to get that access.
I think that, okay. The fact, I appreciate what you said, Ms. Taken, and y'all not gonna gloss over what Hink said, and he said it on several shows. This is the problem. It is not a system designed to have families facilitate peace. You can only draw money, discourse, further billing from chaos. The simple fact is that until this law changes to where women have to now be dehumanized to fight for the very children they birth, they won't understand. And the reason why they don't understand is because you're automatically humanized. The exchange of the demise of the family is still keeping you intact. You're still human. You're still the better parent. You still are the better, more mature, stable individual, no matter how heinous you are. But the man that you took his last name, if it's a marriage, the man that you decided to live under the same roof with, the man that you probably pushed out a number of kids with, and the man that you still want financial help from, you would stay attached to him, but the system dehumanizes that man. They don't do that to women. And this is why it's so hard I don't know if we're doing a good enough job of conveying. The system is not designed for us to facilitate in peace. Until women start to understand that, it will not change. It's always do what you got to do. Men are doing what they got to do.
No.
That's the issue. So it's not a follow the rules. And that's the biggest disconnect that I see a lot of times in these discourses, is that you have women who subscribe to the system and believe that that's the safe haven. That's the structure. It's not. It should happen from a human level. If we no longer can figure out how to work things out, there should be no reason why we can't figure out how to work us out to facilitate support for the children we create. That's mature. That's human. That's not how people are. And that's the issue. I digress.
The scariest part about it, and I experienced this also firsthand, but the scariest part about it is that women will always say, oh, well, you need to fight harder. You want to see your kids, you need to fight harder. Why do I need to fight harder to be in my kid's life? That makes no sense. It's the toll that takes on a man to have to fight to see his kids in a system that's literally milking him to even try to fight his kids. So during this entire period, you're now exhausted. You're exhausted physically, mentally, financially, all because women are telling men, well, you need to fight harder. That makes no sense. There's men out there that don't want to be in their kids' life. And then you have men that are avidly fighting to be in their children's life. And the court system is fucking them over.
So even if you fight harder, point, just if you can. And again, I don't want it to be remiss that I don't understand that these situations don't have, like, I know they happen, but when in the stats is showing even now, currently, that typically 50-50 now is the default for most states. But I guess for me, the question is, based on from what I have read, is that most of the time custody hearings are decided outside of the court, and that typically dads are in agreement with letting the mom have the custodial custody, right? With them agreeing to whatever the visitation situation is going to be. So on the one hand, when I hear men saying things like, I have to fight, I shouldn't have to fight, and I actually agree with you. Most women that I know don't have an issue because they want to break, right? But there are some that don't. I guess the question is, if majority of the time men are agreeing to let the woman have custodial custody before they even get to court, then why is there an issue? I guess the argument at this point that I don't get to see my kid, like, it, to me, it kind of seems like you didn't necessarily want 50-50 to begin with if you're agreeing for her to, keep the kid instead of you wanting to have the kid.
So you're saying why didn't the father take full custody of the kid? I'm not.
No, custodial custody just means the child resides, with that
right.
parent.
Right.
But what I'm saying is, if most men are agreeing to allow that setup without even asking for it, then what does that say? Like, you can't agree for a setup, and then now in these spaces we're hearing men say, well, I should have 50-50. Well, you had the opportunity to do that and agreed, I'd rather the mom have the custodial over the kid. You understand what I'm saying? That doesn't make sense to me. So I want someone to rationalize that for me.
I think what occurs most often is that there's a mediation period, right? And it's not always default, it is changing. Sometimes it is automatic 50-50. But the variables of these exchanges is that it's still a negotiation of sorts. There's lawyers involved, there's paperwork that's being drawn up. Every time you go to court, you're paying to go to court. You're paying for lawyer fees and so on and so forth. So what a lot of times I've seen happen, and it's true, I don't think most men, halfway decent men or decent men, have this vision that they don't want their children that they help birth and create be torn away from their mother. It's just inhumane. Doesn't even make sense. And then some of them are very ignorant to the law, not understanding that 50-50 as it is split half or however you do it does create more of a storm in the future. There's other variables, but mostly that's what I've seen, because they don't just start off at 50-50. A lot of times it's 80-20, 70-30, and they are negotiating to 50-50. By that time, lawyers are very slick. Lawyers work off of billing. I'm only going to make money as I drag this out. So by the time a year and a half don't go by, 2 years don't go by, like Viz said, that man is exhausted financially, physically, emotionally. That's why the fight, as you're saying, because it's not a quick process. Even to get into court takes 4, 5, 6 months, sometimes 9, depending on the weight of it. That's why you see men concede, because the weight of it. And then the system is designed that way. It's unfortunate.
And I do think too, it also goes down to majority of the time, it's not the woman it's not the man is forced to leave the house. You know what I mean? And then that comes with a lot of things too, because from what I've seen and what I've raised, has always been, when I've seen situations like that, the man's kicked out of the house. And the man has to go and stay somewhere until something happens, and then they got to mitigate, and then this, that, and the third. And I think that regardless, I don't think that they're sitting there saying, I don't want the kid, but now I'm going to go to court. It's like True said, is they have no choice, or they feel they don't have a choice. And it's going to take people around them, or maybe they're not even aware of what their choices are, because they're so used to the horror stories that their homeboys go through. And it just trickles down to this thing where it's like, we need to figure out a different way to where they can have a choice. And judging by what off of all the men have said on this panel, they literally feel like when they go to the court, they have no other choice. And the only reasonable clause is to succumb to what the woman says, because he doesn't want to get on bad terms with her, because that's going to raise rip a whole new set of behind for him if he tries to. because it's easy for, especially if he's staying there, if he says one bad move, all she has to do is say you're not seeing him for a week. And even though that's illegal, if he were to try to bring it to court, then the courts are going to be like, well, do you have proof of that? Do you have proof that she withheld your child? You know, so it's things where it's like, if majority of these men around us and on these panels are saying we don't feel that the court is set up for us, then of course it's going to make them feel like, well, what the hell do I do? And then we have all these false allegations, like Hank said, where his homeboy had all these false allegations on him, which prolonged him being able to see his child. So it's just like, we got to figure out, okay, well, how can we start holding these women accountable for what they're doing? You know, it's wrong. It's wrong regardless of the situation. No man should have to go to court to see if he can see his child. You know what I mean? Because at the end of the day, who are you really punishing? You're not punishing him. Yes, you are, but you're also punishing the children. Now, the children got to suffer. The children don't get to see their dad. The children's like, Daddy, where's mommy? The children got to hear you guys arguing back and forth over the phone, over what case may be. So, you know, we got to start holding people accountable for the wrongdoings that they're doing. And until that happens, and until we start recognizing that and acknowledging that, we're always going to have this point where it's just going to be like, well, you could have tried harder. When it's not about trying harder.
I have a question, and maybe, you know, because I'm not in this situation and have not been, but I typically hear more of these, what I'm about to say versus the other way around. How many of you, as men, I'm just thinking statistically, grew up in a single-led household by your mother? And then the question is, if your father had access to you, and if your dad had access, how often did he follow through on coming to see you? And the reason I'm asking that is because a lot of stories that I hear and what I've seen firsthand from the other side with women is that they do allow access to the kid, and then after a while, when the father has been inconsistent with showing up, where the kid is waiting for them to show up to pick them up or go wherever they say they was going to go, and then don't come. I've heard more of those stories than the latter, than what you guys are talking about now in terms of the withholding. So I can say maybe I'm looking through things through a different lens, but that is exactly what I've seen to be more often, and not just me see like when I grew up and had friends that happened to, but just talking to men, like just in regular conversations when we're talking about, when I was growing up, that has typically been the story from other men about their fathers not being consistent in showing up. So
that very much is a thing.
Suffering silence, though. Most men suffer in silence with everything. Most men suffer in silence with everything. So a man would sit there and take it, won't say anything, would just accept it and keep it moving. Most men will do that, even in that situation. How many times you're not going to hear him complain about how he got stiffed by his baby mama? She was late to the drop-off point. Then he had to go because he had to ride 3 hours to get back to his city or his state from where he came from. It happens a lot. Men just don't say nothing about it. Now, I'm a man. I believe in pushing the issue. I believe in putting the heifer on paperwork. I have no problem with I'll put my daughter's mother on paper. When she sent my daughter here late from California here, I put her ass on paper. I went to the judge. Judge, I got tickets for us to go to Disney World. She had to reimburse me half of the price for her ticket and hotel stay because I pushed the issue. But that's me. Not everybody can afford to do that, though. Let me say this last thing before I get off this. Every man, please learn your family court laws in your state. Whatever state you're from, learn your family court laws. Master them, educate yourself on them. Don't allow these heifers to take advantage of you. I'll leave it there.